TVOT Live, the TVO Tomorrow Show conference, is coming up April 26th to the 30th. Go to tvotshow.com to check it all out. Hey everybody, I'm Tracy Swedlow, and this is Television Nation. I am really thrilled to have a couple of gentlemen who know the advertising space backwards and forwards and know where all the bodies are buried and where all the data goes. I'd like to introduce you to Scott McDonald, who is the CEO and president of the Advertising Research Foundation, and Paul Donato, who is the chief research officer. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you,
Tracy.
You can find the ARF at thearf.org. There's lots to be seen there. So much to discuss in terms of how advertising is playing a huge part in the growth of the television medium and generating a lot of revenue for the entire industry across the board. I know there's a lot going on at the ARF, and we're going to go through all that, but Scott, could you tell us, just give us your elevator pitch, tell everybody from your perspective, what is the ARF? What are the goals? What are the goals?
The ARF, I like to describe it as the Switzerland in the middle of a very contested ecosystem. The ARF was founded in 1936 and set up to be the kind of neutral, science-based organization to sort out basic things about how advertising works, how you measure media fairly, how you value those media economically, and how advertising works. And that's still its central purpose. And it's still our sort of true north mission to sort out the wheat from the chaff and try and make sure that there's a science-based explanation for and rationale for anything that's done. So that's still what we are about.
And I know that you have a big partnership with educational organizations. That's your primary, a very important relationship, and you develop all sorts of, communities wrapped around very sticky topics, or right. I should say, difficult, controversial topics, and you try to help solve a lot of those issues and try to create events. Correct? You have a lot of events that people can attend, and it's a really wonderful community in general. And of course,
we describe ourselves as a community of practice. So it's really for the research, the geeks, the research geeks, and all of these companies. It's equally sort of apportioned among marketing companies, the ones that are doing the advertising spending and marketing spending, the ad agencies, the media companies, which now includes all of the digital platforms and those guys, and then all of the research companies, vendors, which now include ad tech, consultancies, and so it's the practitioners across all of those that care about trying to get it right. And for them, we do education, we do conferences, and the councils that you referred to really are sort of peer-to-peer exchanges around very specific areas of commonality. And it's a place where people can share stories about what they're learning, what problems they're having. It allows us to figure out things to do primary research on, but it also just kind of helps those practitioners to be better at the work they're doing on cognition or on, we've got one that's based in LA called the LA Council, funnily enough, that's about all the content creators and like how to get more competitive TV shows that can help you compete against the other competitors in the council. So
you mentioned taking on very complicated and controversial subjects. That's true. I mean, historically, the ARF has done things like done methodological experiments on the way readership was measured through the book versus recent reading. And even today, the MRC has proposed cross-platform standards, which include something called linear time duration weighting. I'll just make it really simple. 4 seconds worth of exposure is worth twice as much as 2 seconds worth of exposure. Is that true? So we're working in that area right now to determine whether or not the relationship between time of exposure to an ad really is linearly related to whether or not a sale is made.
And I think you're also doing something called RCT 21. Is that part of that same initiative you just mentioned, which is
That's a
the
different one. Yeah.
randomized control testing for
Yeah.
cross-platform advertising analysis? Tell me a little bit about that.
So RCT 21 is a what we call kind of a demonstration project to try to show for the industry how you would do something that's really pretty difficult. Right now, you can do nice, pure experiments, and everyone knows that like experimental design with a control group and a test group is like the highest standard of scientific proof. That's how vaccines, for example, get approved. They have to be proven to be effective and not harmful, and they do that through very rigorous experimental design. Well, you can do that in testing whether advertising or marketing campaigns work, but it's hard to do because it's hard to have a pure holdout. And you can kind of do it within a walled garden, so you can do it for Facebook and Google. For example, you can do a test within Facebook. But if you then want to build in your TV ads and test those at the same time, and most campaigns are cross-platform, they're not just in one platform. Then it's really pretty hard to do. So that's what this is about: is how do we do that? How do marketers do that? Demonstrating that and basically setting up a blue ribbon a panel of experts, some of whom compete with some of the people that are trying to do this work, to kind of vet it and create an industry study about best practices for cross-platform.
You've heard randomized control groups if you've been watching the cable news on the vaccine trials.
Is that how it's done?
That's exactly how vaccine is tested. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Interesting. Okay, so I mean, with all of these great goals ahead of you and all of this research to do, and this is an incredible time to try to analyze the TV market, right? Because there are so many changes. The industry is emerging with new offerings, like AVOD is exploding. So there's all kinds of new forms of advertising you can test, and addressable advertising, of course, is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. So many changes in the way people are watching TV, so many new platforms popping up. I mean, how are you going to be able to analyze all that? How are you absolutely getting the data to understand how all those platforms work? Can you give me a little bit of an understanding of like what would be a project to get your hands on these kinds of trends? You just call your member partners and say, what's happening? Is it more conversational, or is there a science? Is there a platform behind the scenes?
That's exactly the kind of research that the LA Council is doing. So, for example, a little over a year ago, before COVID, they were measuring the average number of streaming services that people subscribe to, which was about 3.8. During COVID, that went up to about 4.8. Many of our members, for example, Nielsen and ComScore, are collecting the information on how viewing patterns have changed. Basically, I think Brian Fuhrer from Nielsen puts it at basically St. Patrick's Day through Easter was the major change in viewing behavior. And then after Easter, things started to settle down. And you're starting to see now, news, of course, is news, but now sports is back on air. So you're starting to see more of a settling down of more traditional viewing patterns. But streaming services, the growth in streaming services are here for good, for sure. And all the networks are thinking more about subscriptions in the future rather than just purely advertising supported.
I guess what I'm curious about is, do you get this data, all of this granular data from your member partners, some portion of it? Do you bring it in? Do you clean it? Do you spit it out? Do you do reports based on, things that come in? Or it's more about conversation and community and the events where there's a lot of sharing amongst you all?
No, we do original research. Some of which we pay for the data. In some cases, the data is given to us for analysis. And in some cases, we partner with some of our members to do things like cognition research, neuro research. I mentioned the cross-platform work we did before. There's two phases to that. One is in laboratory. So when do you actually store something in memory when you see an ad? And the second phase will be done with one of our major member partners actually in the field. So if you actually saw an ad on TV for 8 seconds, is it that much more valuable than if you only saw the ad for 4 seconds, as an example?
But what you're also referencing, I think, Tracy, is the complexity of trying to actually get a rating. That if you're buying a bank of ads, um, and the distribution keeps diversifying and multiplying, and there are all these different ways, and someone's watching a show that might be, started on a TV set and then continued on a phone, and then maybe end up some other sort of place. How do you keep track of all of those data? And that's pretty much still a moving target. There are a lot of efforts across the industry to come up with a unified model. Part of that is a debate about exactly what. It's not just about what data you capture, but what metrics do you use. So when Paul was talking about linear time duration weighting, that's a debate about the metric. If you're going to unify the measurement of a rating, where digital and television are treated the same way, then what's the best unit of measurement? Is it a second of exposure to that video? Does it matter? Is the attention different when you're watching that on your phone compared to when you're watching it on a TV set? Should an advertiser pay the same amount of money? Is the attention value similar? Those are all still research questions, and it's a work in progress, I would say, partly because the world changes really, really quickly, but there's a lot of work going on, some of it at the ARF and some at other organizations, in trying to get that right, because it's fundamental to how we pay for all of this stuff.
Well,
People,
sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say, it is a highly debated subject, whether there's going to be one single currency or whether people are going to have to rely on multiple sources of data. So, for example, addressable TV, addressable TV has information on at least a number of households that were tuned to a program, but that's not all consolidated into one single source, and that's a heavily debated issue in the industry, whether people are simply going to have to rely on multiple sources for measuring the audience for their ads.
I interviewed Radha Subramaniam, who is the president of CBS Research, and not too long ago, and she basically said, look, I just go and look at all of the different sources of data that I need to look at, and I just make an assessment, and I know I'm just going to have to deal with that, and I'm okay with that. That was her attitude. And it sounds to me like, obviously, it's still in that sort of state, but I asked her at the time, what about solutions that have promised, some kind of tagging through, all the ads, or blockchain, some kind of solution that could unify things in a protected way. Maybe we'll have to wait for quantum computers. I don't know. But is there any hope on the horizon that there will be some kind of unification? Are there any platforms that you are hopeful about?
Yeah, I don't know which platform that might be. Like I say, there's some serious proposals being looked at. There's a whole initiative that was initiated by the World Federation of Advertisers, global body that laid out some criteria. There are, again, proof of concept efforts that we are connected to, but it's a big hairy audacious goal, so I think it's something where you just sort of have to say, watch this space. And that's sort of to Radha's point as well. You still have to do business even before you've got all this stuff solved and everybody's convinced that it's right. So it doesn't mean you don't stop doing business, and you don't stop doing work to try and get it right. So you've got to kind of fly the plane while you're building it in some ways.
No, scary. That sounds scary to me. So maybe that's where I can jump in and ask you, if I have my notes on the screen over here, that's why I'm looking over here. Is there a reason behind purchasing the Marketing Science Institute? Is it about doing more research that's close to the, protected academic environments that you think might prove fruitful? What were the goals behind buying the the MSI?
Well, it's maybe a little incorrect to say that we bought them. They came to us to be
Acquisition.
acquired. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We got a
But they
real good price.
yeah, they came with a dowry, so we didn't actually spend money. They gave us the money to kind of join us. So that's kind of nice. They're a smaller organization, very specialized, very elite in some ways, that has historically built strong bridges between academic researchers. So the leading scholars at American business schools, and the practitioner committee or community of companies. But they were smaller, and I think wanted. They saw some value in a combination, and I certainly saw it. I used to belong to MSI back when I worked at Time Warner and Condé Nast, and always had very high regard for the caliber of work that they did. They historically have kind of tended to a different subject matter from the ARF, overlapping, but we were very focused on advertising and media measurement. And they were always very focused on a lot of the other parts of marketing. So merchandising, in-store pricing research, product development research, consumer choice models, behavioral economics, stuff like that. Our members are really interested in a lot of those subjects. Why not combine, we've got these sort of complementary research agendas. We've both got very high standards of scientific probity and making sure it's serious, real research that will pass sort of rigorous review. Why not combine? So it was really as simple of an idea of that, seeing that we could be providing value to their members and they would be providing value to our members. So we're delighted. We couldn't be happier. It's a lot of work to figure out how to make the integration work, but that's a happy project for us. So.
Well, I mean, and both of you are nonprofit organizations,
Right.
but because you're so close to academia, is there a chance that there might be opportunities for new businesses to emerge inside this partnership, or the relationship with students that that could pop out? I mean, we all know about Stanford being such an accelerator essentially for Silicon Valley, but so I'm wondering, is there an opportunity for some new business to come out of all of this research, or do you think you'll just stay into pure research?
Oh, no. I think there are business opportunities in there. And we already have something under the ARF umbrella called the ARF Innovation Studio, which is the house of where we have SIM. And I think
With Jane.
With Jane, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's our innovation lab, and they're constantly evaluating new innovations that are coming out, really around television audience measurement, about some of these technical issues that we're talking about. But that innovation studio is certainly a place where we can seed ideas and try and incubate them for the good of the industry. RCT21 is a similar idea. And it was housed at the ARF, but it could have been housed at SIM. It could have been housed at MSI, depending upon how you structured it. But it's the idea of this is trying to do something new, something that's hard to do. Let's see if we can do it, but do it in a way that's transparent. So people, it's not a black box. People that are involved in it can see how it works. We can have a thorough critique of what was good, bad, and ugly about the demonstration project and advance the learning of the industry. Our goal as a nonprofit is to try to have a benefit for our public. We're not getting rich from it, but we're trying to improve the practice. And all of those organizations are really about doing that, serving that same mission. So I'm really delighted that we can harmonize them within the ARF.
Paul, since you're in charge of the research and you have access to all of these different resources and new with MSI, I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are about how you will embrace shopping, shoppable TV, all of these sort of notions and attribution, and all of these kinds of things that are going on where there's direct ROI. in, that can be offered to the advertisers. What kinds of research projects do you think will be able to embrace and show us how all of these things are completely shaping television in new ways? Is that on your agenda?
It is on our agenda. The research that we do generally is directed towards what our members, they actually vote on where we should put our research resources. So we do a survey generally once every other year. They've identified cross-platform and attribution as two of the most important topics. Probably what was most discussed this year and what we've done a lot of work in is what will attribution look like when third-party cookies go away. Basically, I think the long-term effect of that is actually positive for brands because it's going to force people to do more contextual advertising, more brand building advertising, a little less targeting, a lot more first and second party cookies. And I think that is good for brand building. It's kind of a return to more traditional advertising. So we do a lot of work in that field. We're doing a lot of work in the field of brand loyalty. The thought was that because of direct to consumer and online, brand loyalty is going down. We're not quite sure we see evidence of that. We're working with both IRI and Nielsen on their data in that area. Of course, the cross-platform podcast advertising is on the agenda. And I think for 2021, probably the most significant project we'll be working on is tracking what brands did during 2020. If they went dark on air, did they stay on air? And how it affects their market share in the next 2 to 5 years moving forward. Based on the last recession, when brands went dark during a recession, it basically took up to 5 years for them to recover market share. This will be an interesting test whether that occurs again.
Are you watching local broadcasting? Because we're studying, the launching of all of these new ATSC 3.0 enabled networks and stations around the country. It's probably still too early to tell how that's going to go, but local broadcasting has seen, I think, a little bit of a bump. Are you guys watching that?
We are. Actually, if you spoke to local broadcasters around May, they were dying budget-wise, but the political spending has been so incredible that most of them are telling us they're actually going to make their budget for 2020 because of the political ad spend. So local and national are just about the same in terms of ad revenue, so just as important as national.
And what kinds of initiatives do you have for studying addressable, because it's still so nascent and there are so many competing offerings out there to be the main tracking?
Well, RCT actually uses addressable TV to study whether someone actually saw an ad and if they eventually bought something, whether it was a successful or an effective ad. So we're using addressable TV in our research program.
Well, I mean, when third-party cookies disappear, I don't know is there a date for that? I don't think there's a date for that. But
Originally, it was to be 2022. I don't know if Google is still sticking to that date.
I mean, what criteria do you think will be important at that point when, buying habits are different, tracking habits are different? I mean, what are you guys predicting?
Most people believe that there'll be a significant increase in first and second party cookies. So people trying to develop first party relationships. A couple of the attribution companies, the identity companies, and Google themselves have said they're going to be building sandboxes, which are basically clusters of 50 to 100 different people who are similar. You can't really reverse engineer their identity, but you would target towards some of those clusters. And then third, contextual advertising. So if you want to reach travelers, you go to, a travel and leisure website or a travel and leisure magazine. As I was saying before, all of that is moving sort of one step to the left of more precise targeting, closer to contextual advertising. You're not really reaching individuals, you're reaching groups of similar people or people who you have a first party relationship with.
Do you have any members who are exploring interactive shopping and things like that? I mean, because that will give you direct tracking, of what's happening with this, that, or that ad. And I mean, what kind of work are you guys doing about shoppable TV? Any?
We haven't done anything yet. Amazon is a member, and so we'd love to work with them in terms of what they're seeing. And so, if they are willing to do a research project with us, we have a committee that actually directs what research projects we do. We're meeting next week, and so we will put that on the agenda.
Well, Amazon, if they were to turn on actual interactive commerce, on Fire TV or something, they would, obviously dominate the universe even more than they already are. But they haven't done it yet. I mean, that's a question for them. Why haven't they done that yet? But it's curious, just putting that out there, because there are solutions out there. NBC has launched different things, and I think at some point something will happen, like Amazon will introduce it, and then the whole community will sort of fall in line. Anyway, that's just an observation. And so tell me a little bit about the I think this is more of a question for you, Scott, the ARF wide initiative, which is the
Workforce Initiative for Diversity and Excellence.
Yes, I know that's not necessarily that's not part of the efforts to bring more illumination to research, but why did you start that particular initiative?
We'd been talking about it in some form or another for a couple of years, and initially there'd been a company that was offering to fund it at a very generous level, and things changed for that company, and they couldn't end up doing it, and we had to go through a whole process of applying for a charitable subsidiary. So we were going through a lot of bureaucratic hoops. We actually submitted the application right as the government was being shut down because of quarrels in Washington. So we were like sending it into the void and hoping for the best. But it came back. We got approved with our nonprofit charitable subsidiary called the ARF Charitable Foundation. But the company that was planning to help us seed this, and the idea of WIDE is basically to take the network of the ARFs. We got 400 companies. They are many of them have expressed their interest in having a more diverse workforce, but they often think that the applicant pool isn't diverse enough, and when they're trying to find the people that are qualified. So I said, why don't we start working really with schools, with colleges, and try and provide scholarship support to underrepresented, disadvantaged students interested in coming into the field, give them an opportunity to come to some of our programs, meet people, get mentored, set them up with internship, summer internship positions, and just like act our part as a network there that tie the two together. So that's essentially what we did. But we had to kind of boot it up from scratch over the summer. So that's where I came up with the idea of offering to do a matching grant for a capital campaign. So we got that started, and it pretty much worked. We raised $250,000 for scholarships, and so we're at the point now with ARF Wide of naming the first 20 ARF Wide scholars at state or public universities, 4 public universities across the country. So we have our first cohort of those, and they're getting their first checks this month. So it's actually up and running, and we're planning the internship program to start during the summer. A lot of companies, because of COVID and the COVID-related recession, a lot of companies that have internships are telling us that they're not running them during the summer, but we think we'll have a decent number of them to at least start. And again, working with the same partner schools. So we're quite happy at the start that we've managed to make. It's gotten very good support from ARF members and from the board, and some corporate support that's fairly important. The Nielsen Foundation, Verizon Corporation, GFK, and Ipsos have all helped. We took the David Ogilvy Awards that we give for creative excellence, and it's usually a gala at a hotel. We knew that wasn't in store for last fall when we did the award, so we just converted it into an hour-long like reality TV show with the finalists interviewing the contestants, going inside the jury room, and then finally doing the big reveal, and did all of that as a fundraiser for ARF wide, charging people $30 a ticket, and raise some money. So we're we're becoming fundraisers among other things, but it's very gratifying. The applications that you get to see, the students are really excited, and they really are. It's really great to be able to help them at a time like this. Many of them are from families that were harmed directly by COVID, and they need the help. So it's good to be able to do it.
Sounds great. Really a good initiative. Perhaps it might also play a part by bringing in those people to strengthen whatever work you're doing to understand how advertising plays a role in diverse communities. Because,
Absolutely.
can you talk a little bit about that? Or maybe that's Paul. Is that something that you're pursuing?
Well, I mean, what I'd say is that it's important to have diversity in many places in companies, but I think no place is it more important than in the marketing and research and insights area, where you get tone deaf advertising, where someone tries to, be too clever by half. That's usually because they didn't have the right voices in the room when they were framing or testing the ad, to say, no, that's offensive. That doesn't make sense. You shouldn't do that. So to me, it's great to have diverse people in the accounting department and the HR department and all those other things, but it's really fundamental and essential to a company to have it in marketing and research.
We have a cultural council, and they're very active researching this area. For example, they did a project last year in terms of view-through rates for digital ads on digital video, where there were cultural elements and where there were no cultural elements. So we're very active in the field. They also did some pretty interesting, I'll say, sort of share groups, where what it's like to be someone working in a department where nobody looks like you. So we had several senior executives sort of talk about what their experiences were. So they're doing good work in that council.
That sounds really interesting. Well, tell me a little bit about what your priorities are in terms of how to be ahead of the challenge of understanding the marketing business for the next 12 months. What's your top priority?
I can tell you what my top priority is, and I sort of mentioned it before, but at the start of the lockdown and COVID and then the social unrest, we had a tremendous number of inquiries about what do people do during a recession, or what do people do during periods of large social unrest. And much of what we could cite was based on the work that was done during the last recession, 2008. There's a couple of Journal of Advertising Research articles on it. And so we were going off of data that was really 10 years old. This is sort of a triple play. We coined the phrase duality, which is a pandemic-driven recession. And so nobody really knows how it's going to play out. But we want to study what brands did in 2020. Did they go off air? Did they increase market? Did they use purpose advertising, cause advertising, or did they use sales, stick with a sales program, and then track that for the next probably 3 to 5 years to see how long, where people went dark, whether they lost market share, and how long to recover that market share. And if people increase their share of voice, one theory is if you increase your share of voice during a recession because media expense is much less expensive, increase your share of voice. In the past, it has been seen that you also increase your market share over the next several years. We'll be looking for those success stories also.
And I think
Scott?
my answer would be, it's drawing really a lot on what we're focused on right now with integrating the Marketing Science Institute, MSI, into ARF. And that idea I described before, they're having fairly complementary kinds of research. But as we move from the COVID period, and we're not going to get ahead. The economy can't recover any faster than the health of the public can recover. So I mean, it's entirely beholden to getting of defeating the virus and moving out of that. But I do believe that we've got a lot of very strong fundamentals, in the economy to make it a strong recovery. There will be a rebound in marketing activities and marketing spending. And a lot of the questions are going to be really about what's the best way to spend that money. Some of that's going to be in advertising, some of that's going to be in other kinds of marketing channels. And the barrier between the two is fuzzier and fuzzier because you've got advertising at the point of sale inside Amazon. You've got, CPG companies that are focused on their first party data. 10 years ago, none of them cared about that at all. Now they all do. And you've got media companies that are trying to sell their subscriptions because they're not just based on advertising anymore. They're Disney Plus. They're trying to have a consumer revenue stream that they manage as a subscription business. So the worlds of MSI and ARF have converged a lot in the same way that the worlds of advertising and marketing have converged a lot. And that puts us in a position of actually being able to help our members a lot more in answering the question, not only when is the recovery going to happen post-COVID, how fast will that be? How fast will we be back in the offices? When can we reopen our retail channels? But how do we do that in a way that it improves our business the most? And I think that's the central question for 21. That's where we're going to be focused a lot. And that coincides a lot with being able to really try to leverage this combination that we've got now of two powerhouse research organizations.
One thing you just pointed out was that, with the rise of subscription-based services that have such a strong bond with their community, right? Like Disney Plus, I'm kind of curious, do you think that advertisers will start collaborating with those organizations who sort of curate their communities, so there'll be more of a partner of those organizations, or will there always be a one-to-one attempt to communicate to the consumer, and so that's their first client? So, like, would you think
Probably both.
Do you know what I mean? Like that, I feel
Yeah.
like potentially the who they're speaking to or who they're speaking for or with is going to have a big influence as these walled gardens get stronger and stronger and eventually have a shoppable component. So I think that's a future looking statement. I'm kind of curious what you think about that.
Well, I think it's a bit of all of the above. The growth of those subscription services is part of the reason that AVOD's been growing too, because there's less advertising inventory. The more people are watching Netflix, the less advertising inventory there is. It's pushing a lot of, because Netflix is an ad-free environment. And so, as advertisers look for other places to be, it ends up being a bit of both. If you get growth for Disney Plus, but you need Hulu. You got like a lot. And there's a lot more inventory in Hulu than there was before. So it is a complicated terrain right now, but I view it as being a place really where both ad-supported and subscription-supported media are increasing, and so I don't view one model as winning out over the other. I think they all will be they will be growing. I think the area of advertising, of audio advertising and ad-supported podcasting is very, very interesting right now. A lot of big moves being made, but this is again just partly because the behavior is changing. People got buds in their ears. They're spending their time differently because of COVID, and some of that will last past the pandemic, and some of it won't. They'll go back to drive time or something, whereas now they might be, having those moments to be exposed to ads with earpods in. So from the standpoint of researchers, it just always means that there's more good stuff to try to understand because it changes a lot.
I just wanted to point out that Netflix is ad-free, sort of, kind of. Product placement has definitely worked its way into Netflix originals, the most famous example of which was the last episode of Stranger Things, where someone is drinking a soft drink as the movie theater is falling down all around them.
Right.
Oh, my daughter made me buy her some Legos. She wanted from Stranger Things. She wanted to understand what they were. So now we have this whole box of Legos in our freezer, which we can't get through them all. Anyway, so yes, you're right. It's very effective, those the embedded advertising. Well, one last sort of question. Do you think advertisers have played a positive role in helping this country keep it together during this crisis? Maybe that's a loaded question. Do you think they've done a good job?
Yeah, absolutely. I do.
I wasn't going to offer an opinion. I will say we did a lot of work last year on cause and purpose advertising. People want brands to take a position. A lot of that came out of the work that we did, but also all the literature that we reviewed. People do want brands to take a position on issues like social injustice. Some do, some don't. I don't know what the impact has been.
Yeah,
that sounds like a great topic.
That consumers, I mean, some of the survey work shows that that there's actually more a belief in some brands than in some of our institutions. And it depends upon those brands, but yeah, you've got marquee brands, and they can take leadership positions. I think the other thing is that brands increasingly are aware of how much they compete for talent. So, leading brands care about what their employees think about them, and what other constituencies think about them as well, and that very much gets into the realm of politics and brand purpose and other things like that. You know.
You're actually an interesting observation, because, and this is sort of getting off into a whole nother hornet's nest, but recently a group of engineers unionized inside Google, right? Because they were angry at the fact that Google had eroded their brand, raison d'etre, right, to not be evil, and relationships with organizations and countries they weren't happy with. So it's interesting how the employees are perhaps insisting that brands be true to whatever original goals that they had, and that will play a part going forward. That word authenticity has been so important, right, in the last few years, and I'd be curious. I wonder if that's an interesting research project to discuss the role of truth in advertising.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes in the brand purpose study that we did was, "If you think it's risky, it is." Meaning you don't have a place. Yeah. You're not authentic in this area.
Well, I think this is a good place to stop, unless there's anything else that you'd like to mention. It seems like there's a lot of great work going on there. You've got all kinds of events coming up this month.
What's some of them?
There are so many events coming up, and we wish you well in all of those. We'll be doing our own event, but we kind of overlap. But we love the fact that you're a nonprofit research organization supporting all of the people in the TV industry who love participating in all of the activities over there. I know you also have a women. I read a women's group.
Women in Analytics. Yeah.
Women in Analytics, right? And so there's some really great work going on there. The website is full of information, and I highly recommend perusing it and signing up for their materials. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thanks,
I really
Tracy.
appreciate it. Oh, but quick question, Scott. What's your PhD in? I never found that.
Sociology.
So,
Yeah, it was quantitative sociology.
Curious mind studies sociology. And Paul, I noticed that you're interested in space and things like that, which I am too. That's another story. Cool. All right, we're going to close on that personal statement. Thank you so much. Thanks to Bill Daddy out there, Daddy Brand. We love Bill. Thank you, Scott McDonald, who is the CEO, and where's my title? What's your title?
President and CEO. So same
President,
thing.
CEO. Yeah, what's the difference between president and
Yeah,
CEO? I still don't understand.
Yeah.
And Paul Donato, who is the Chief Research Officer, leading the charge. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Happy New Year.
Same to
Happy
you.
New Year.
Thanks, Tracy.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
I'm Tracy Swedlow. Please contact me. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast is for the entire community, the nation of for the TV industry to communicate and talk amongst each other. Thank you so much, everyone. Happy New Year.
Bye.
Bye-bye.